This video is going to provide a demonstration for activity 417, simulating cam motion. In this video, we are going to take a Fusion 360 CAD model that has been provided to us, and we're going to install some of the cams that have been modeled in previous activities. So then that way we can see what kind of motion that each cam will give us, and also be able to analyze what kind of motion graph we can gain by using the measurements from the cam model as well. So this is going to be what the final product will look like when we're done, and I'm going to lead us through the process of how to get this working for us. So I'm going to go ahead and close this down. One thing I'm going to start off with, just to make visibility a little bit easier, I'm going to turn off the visibility for the box left side by clicking on the visibility icon or the eyeball icon, and same thing for the right side of the box. So it will make things just a little bit nicer as we start to bring in some of our cam models. So I'm going to open up my data panel. I do have a folder here that has all of our files that I'm going to need. So these are cams that I modeled in a previous activity, the parametric cams, the standard cams, and then I do have one custom cam that was designed in activity 416. So I'm going to go ahead and grab an eccentric cam by right-clicking on it and saying Insert into Current Design. And then using the Move Copy command, I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to the left side here. And with that, with the left side, we can notice that we have a crank handle and we have a crank gauge that will allow us to see what angle that we're turning the cams and what position that they will be in. With that, I'm going to go through and make sure that each cam is in its lowest position. So I'm going to grab the grips. I want to make sure, one, the cams are facing in the right direction, but also, if I was to install this at 0 degrees, the cam's lowest position that the follower would be at would be rotating this around, so that way this would be the lowest position that follower would be in. So I'm going to go ahead and say OK, and then I'm going to install the cam by utilizing the joint command. We're going to, by default, it is set to rigid. You can either check that from the little shortcut menu that pops up, or you can go to the motion tab. Rigid will be what we use. For position, we're looking for a snap point. I'm going to zoom in. I want to choose the hole. So when I hover over with the mouse, you'll see a dark outline that will show up. And I'll select, when that does, the joint origin chip will line up right in the center of the circle. And then I'm going to look at the end of the axle. So the axle is round as well. Because of the color of the crank handle, you're probably not going to be able to see the outline, but you'll at least be able to see a preview of where the joint origin chip will line up at. So when we see that, I can click and the cam will move to that position. The only thing I have to worry about here is offsetting that cam so that way it's directly underneath the roller, and I try to get it where it's directly underneath the follower as well. So typically I usually look at this as being about a 1.25 offset, and that looks like it lines up pretty well. I can go ahead and say OK. And what I'm going to do now is I can go ahead and, since I've got that cam installed, I'm going to go ahead and start bringing in some of the others. So I'm going to bring in a pair cam. While anytime you bring this in, the Move Copy command will be active. I always get in the habit of going ahead and getting these positioned where I would like them. So I'm going to go ahead and rotate the cam down, and then I'm going to rotate it 180 degrees so that way that the follower will be in the lowest position, because the rounded end that kind of sticks up that causes the displacement would be putting the roller in the highest position. So same process, joining. And one thing that I would get in the habit of doing, you'll notice that when you're zoomed out, it's kind of hard to see what it is sometimes, what you get selections that you'll have. So I'll go ahead and I'm going to select there. And then I'll go ahead and choose the axle as well. And you're going to see there's where the cam moves in, and then we can offset each cam. So this here I think is 2.35. I think about every offset is usually, well, maybe 2.30 looks a little bit better. And even then 2.25 I think is actually the optimal. So most of these are going by every about 1/4 of an inch. So the next two I'm going to bring in will be the snail cam. This one I'm going to actually focus on the right side, since these are going to be closer to the right side here. Same kind of thing. rotating, and we'll put this into the lowest position. That way that the follower is in, it will be in the lowest position. Jointing. Now when I do this from the right side, I'm going to put my mouse over the axle. You'll see there is a snap point that shows up at the end of the axle that's covered up by the black axle cap. So I'm going to go ahead and hold the control key, and you'll see if you move down to that point, it will lock in on the axle, and I can select the point. And then that way I can ignore kind of what else is there. And I'm going to put this snail cam underneath that third follower. And then the heart cam will be last to be installed. I'm going to do kind of like all the standard cams here. This one here, I'm not going to have to rotate 180 degrees because the lowest position the follower would be at would rest right in here between the two lobes on the cam of the heart. So I'm going to go ahead and joint. Same process, hover over the axle, choose the snap point, and then I can go ahead and offset this here. So negative 1.25 will work well for the offset. As far as this goes, here we have all of our cams installed, so that way they would be in the lowest positions. And as of January 2022, we used to have to, before that date, we used to have to go through and do a lot of kind of like joint limits and finding displacement, and there was a little bit more kind of involved in enabling contact between different bodies or components. Now, after January of 2022, Fusion now has in the assemble panel a tangent relationship option. So this allows us to create a tangent relationship between the face of a body and a component and select a second component to which it would go through and keep a tangent relationship. So I'm going to go ahead and select that. It's looking for a first component. So on this one, I'm going to choose the rounded edge of the first roller, and then I want to choose the edge of the cam. That will make sure that I keep it in contact. So you may see some of these may move, but I'm going to go ahead and say OK. And if it happens to move on you like that, you can always go through and actually you'll see a little bit of the simulation here. Here is the, we'll move that back into the 0 position. To make sure it's exactly at 0, I'm going to expand the joints folder, and here Revolute 9, if I right click, I can say go to home position, and that'll put it back to 0. But I'm going to, from here I can go ahead and choose some of the other relationships by using tangent relationship. So between that second follower and the edge of the pair cam, and repeating the same process for the remaining cams. So again, if the crank handle moves, go ahead and return it to the home position, and then that way we can make sure that everything's good there. Now, one thing you might see is if I do a tangent relationship between the bottom of the fourth roller and in the space between the lobes on the heart cam, you're going to see there will be a conflict. So this is where Fusion needs a little bit of help. So I'm going to go ahead and actually I'm going to hit the X next to component 2, and what I'm going to do is actually under the selection, when it's highlighted blue, I'm going to choose the edge of the lobe, and that'll actually turn it to maintain contact, and then everything works out well. So I'm going to go ahead and say OK. And now what I can do is I can see that if I right click on Revolute 9 and say animate model, the cams and everything will animate, and I'm able to see the motion that each cam generates and to compare how each follower moves up and down, and you can also see how they